Hello and welcome to the first episode of Neurodiversity in Discussion. We are David Gray-Hammond and
Tanya Adkin, hi.
we're going to use this kind of podcast Q&A format. Um, we're thinking every other month, I think was what we settled on, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And we're going to cover different topics and people can join in the conversation. We thought that'd be more fun than a standard podcast because, you know,
Yeah, all standard presentations as well, because
yeah.
it kind of goes against our nature to try and not do tangential kind of conversation anyway. And I always think that's where the most interesting parts are, isn't it?
Yeah, and we really want people to kind of see this as a space of learning through conversation. We don't want to be sat here hammering you with slides and kind of
Assuming what you might know or might not know as well.
so the topic of today's conversation to get us started is monotropism and lilipadding.
Mm.
We're not going to assume anyone knows these things. So, Tanya, to begin
I
with,
love how you explain monotropism,
but
Tanya. There
this
you
this
go.
is this is your whole thing, Tanya, you know?
Well, it's one of my whole things. I have many whole things.
How
Yeah,
would you
so
how would you
how
define monotropism?
Oh, right. So I would say, well, monotropism was something that came around in the 90s. It was written about, well, it was conceptualized by Dinah Murray, Fergus Murray's mother, Wen Lawson and Mike Lesser, as what used to be thought of as the only unifying theory of autism. And that's how I was taught actually on my master's degree about monotropism. And in a nutshell, what it's trying to say is that monotropic people, or what they were saying were autistic people, um, every neurotype has a limited amount of attentional resources, but they're saying that monotropic people have laser focus. So those attentional resources are spent in a much deeper attention tunnel than those of a polytropic person, which can be spread across multiple different things at once. So I always say it's like the difference between a laser light and a torch light. But from that, what that means is we can exceed our attentional resources much more. It then looks at things like sensory processing, it looks at burnout. And actually, I would say it's probably it always gets touted as like some massively positive way of looking at autistic experience, doesn't it? But actually, it's very neutral. It's just going, hey, this is the way we think autistic attentional kind of processing is different. So yeah, it's a way of understanding the differences in attentional resource distribution between autistic thinkers and well, polytropic. I will say polytropic rather than non-autistic, because what we're now seeing is we're starting to emerge that actually ADHDers do actually strongly identify as well. So there's been a small scale questionnaire study done, and the people who identify strongest with monotropism are people who identify as autistic and ADHD. But anecdotally as well, we get people reach out to us, from the voice hearing community, schizophrenic community, people who've, been given labels of personality disorder, PTSD. We're all kind of looking at this whole kind of ever moving understanding of neurodivergence. And yeah, it's kind of growing, isn't it, David?
It's kind of like monotropism, it turns out, may or may not be like different flavors of monotropism that describe neurodivergence
Mm.
or a lot of neurodivergence. And
Yeah.
certainly, the deeper I've gone on this subject, I certainly see its connection to my schizophrenic elements. I certainly see its connection to my ADHD elements. Um, but I wanted to pose a question to you, which is,
So,
people often say, well,
mhm.
I'm autistic, but I'm also ADHD. I can do lots of things at once. I don't only focus on one thing. that's a challenge that I've heard put to monotropism a lot, that, well, I'm not monotropic because I don't just focus on one thing at once. I can focus on several things at once. How would you respond to that?
So the thing about monotropism is it means that we have an interest-led attentional system. So it's interest-led. If you are ADHD, you actually may be needing to have a certain level of stimulation to stay interested, and that may actually be your monotropic flow state, juggling all those different balls. When we're dragged into something that we are not intrinsically motivated by, say form filling, and don't get me wrong, intrinsic motivation doesn't mean that you know something is important, like you have to fill this forming or do this shopping or pay these bills. It's something that almost catches our interest, hooks our attention in. Maybe from an ADHD perspective, it may be the things that give us dopamine, you know? So it's about, I would say, the core of monotropism. And I think the way that it's been understood is now shaping with people that are looking at it. But the core of it really is about staying in an interest-led flow state where we can move at our own pace and transition at our own pace to one thing to another. But unfortunately, the world doesn't work like that. And we do things with a lot of depth as well. So monotropism isn't just about being hyper focused on one thing at a time or being only able to pay attention to one thing at a time. If obviously that's not true. I mean, I'm a parent. Anybody who's been a parent knows that you have to split your attention, or even been responsible for children in any way, you have to split your attention. So the idea that we can only singularly focus is a bit of what I think, a misunderstanding of the theory. It's that we focus on fewer things deeper. So it means that we're regularly put into positions where the demands on our attentional resources, because being like focusing on things that you aren't intrinsically motivated is a demand in itself, are often exceeded. If hope that helps, David.
Yeah. I guess the way I would think of it, sort of in an analogy, and we love our analogies
We
here.
love an analogy.
You know, it's the difference between snorkeling above a reef and, you're in the shallows and you're sort of breathing from the surface, or taking a submersible down to the Mariana Trench. There's still lots of things to focus on down there. There's loads of things. There's lots of stimulation. But
Yeah.
your attention goes deeper, and you might be more focused on particular things. And for me, that's how I've always related to monotropism. It was never that I can only focus on one thing. It's that the things I do focus on, I focus on in a greater depth.
Yeah, definitely. And sometimes I would say, for me as an ADHD as well, and I want to like just restate this, actually, you know, getting the right level of stimulation and flitting between things that I find intrinsically motivating with great depth is actually what I can refer to as flow state, you know. So when it was originally spoken about monotropism, flow state was what would have been known as like hyperfocus. But actually, I think what we're seeing more and more is that it's just about being in a rhythm that fits with your nervous system, that fits with your style of processing, because we may all have the same diagnosis or identify with the same kind of neurodivergence, but we're all intrinsically very different. And I always say about autism plus environment, you always quote me on this. What I can't even remember what it was. There are an infinite number of,
There's an infinite number of ways to interact with one's environment, and therefore there are an infinite number of ways to burn out.
or even to respond, or to be in flow state, you know? So this idea that we're all kind of fixed and like to be monotropic, we can't do that if we flit our attention. But are you flitting your attention because you need a certain level of stimulation to stay regulated? Are you flitting your attention deeply amongst subjects, but not into things that you know you. When I did my masters, you body doubled me through the entire thing.
Yeah,
And if we, even now when we write, right, we can sit there and we can stare at a screen for 5 minutes. If it's not happening, it's not happening.
yeah.
But you catch me when something has annoyed me and I'm on the phone and David's like, right, let's write an art, and that's it. We've got that there then, and we can do 10 things at once.
Tanya literally had me making notes just before we started this on something that we're both going to write about, because to be fair, we know we'll forget about it if we don't write it down. Um, Dana Miller jumped in and said, I see it as several tabs being open, but you're mainly working on one whilst being aware of others. I can't
Mm.
chop onions and hold conversation, one will suffer. That's an interesting one, because particularly with those, like I do go deep on things.
Oh yeah.
But if I'm doing kind of surface level jobs, like I think of like doing the dishes is quite surface level. Preparing food is relatively surface level for me. I'm not going. I'll be focused quite intently on it, but it's not like going deep on a topic. And for me, if I'm doing a surface level topic in demand and someone is trying to engage me in conversation, I will very quickly get annoyed, because I need to get this done so that I can get back to what I'm intrinsically motivated to do. And now you're
Yeah.
trying to add another demand of me listening to your conversation.
Well, that's such an interesting coping strategy, isn't it? Front loading. I do it all the time. I front load so that I can spend more time in a flow state.
Should we talk a bit about what front loading is and how it applies to?
Yeah, so front loading for me, and I think it's just like obviously it's come through years of masking and trying to be perfect and trying to all of those wonderful things that come with like being a late diagnosed assigned female at birth autistic person. So yeah, I've trained myself and I don't like being in wait mode either, which I'll talk about, but I've trained myself to feel almost a sense of urgency to get the things done that I need to get done early while I have the spoons. So that gives me more freedom.
Mm.
And that really works for me. I'm not saying that works for everybody, but that really works for me. And actually, I limit what I can do in a day, like so many tasks or so many this or so many that, because I'm not looking to fill the free time. I'm looking to be engaged in flow state. And that might be writing an article with David, researching, doing things like this. Like this for me is like quite spoon giving because there's no structure, there's no demand. I love the fact that like David was like, you don't have to do slides. I was like, yes, I'm in, you know, because that's what being in flow state is, isn't it? It's like that flowing conversation. But
Yeah, and for me, the front loading, I have a particular method of front loading. So one thing I really struggle with is like the general admin and housekeeping of being an adult in a flat that you are responsible for. So I book the jobs into my work calendar before my work day starts as appointments, because I have this rule in my head that if it's in my calendar as an appointment, I have to do it. So before my day starts, there's like jobs.
oh my,
Hey,
I'm going to make appointments with you from now on. So like when you go MIA, that's it. I am going to make appointments with you.
yeah, you make an appointment with me, I'll be there. Look, I'm completely controlled by my calendar. If Google Calendar ever goes down, you'll just find me sitting silently in a chair staring off into the distance.
Like, what am I supposed to do next? I'm totally like that. I use
Yeah.
Google Calendar for everything. But I also see, like, because I think as well, and I love the way this is going, like life hacks and stuff. But I also think that we have like an unavoidable inherent amount of internalized ableism and shame about what we should be doing. So conceptualizing things like thinking about myself through a lens of monotropism means that I need flow state and time for flow to be a healthy autistic individual. So it means that I'm not shaping things as resting and sitting there and going, I should be doing this or I should be doing that. That should is just could, but with shame attached thing. I love that. But, I know now that I need to schedule time to be in that flow state, and it kind of sidesteps my kind of internalized ableism around resting and what rest looks like as well. Rest doesn't look like it may look like binge watching like Married at First Sight or something. I totally do that. It turns my brain off. I'm not ashamed. But also it might look like deep diving some research or reading a work bundle or actually doing more work. So I think what I do is schedule time, front load things so that I'm able to have that time where I'm literally just following my own interests, building like a connection with my own introspection and just like resting in an active way, in a way that gives me spoons and switches the rest of the world off.
Yeah, yeah. Dana says putting appointments into the calendar is a demand too. Yeah, it is. It is. But it's that front loading thing. I know if I get this out of the way, I'll have time later to do the things I love. And for me, that flow state, that deep flow state, it's like one of the most peaceful experiences in the world for me. And this kind of ties into the work I do professionally, because one of the things I do is the mindfully divergent community,
Mm.
where we're only just getting started, but my goal with that community that people can join is that I can almost queer the normativity out of mindful practice. And so
Yeah.
take this idea of what neurodivergent monotropic life is and find a way to use mindful practice to kind of augment and smush the two together. And for me, flow state is a mindful practice because
Mm.
it's when I'm most present. It's when it's almost like a form of meditation for me. When I go deep into flow state on a subject or a task that I love, that is one of the most mindful experiences I can have. Or when I'm stimming and really focusing on the experience of the stim, that's a mindful practice for me. These deep flow states, they are rejuvenating. They shut out the chaos for a while, and that's what I love about flow state. And I think this is one of the things that I would really highlight for people. And VJ says active resting, and yeah, active resting, because rest isn't always doing nothing. And
Oh, it's never doing nothing.
this is one of the things I communicate to people when I'm doing peer mentoring with them. Okay, you're burnt out. The temptation is to go to your bed and not do anything. That doesn't actually recover you.
No, it doesn't. It makes things worse. It makes your world smaller. I think that's the thing about being a monotropic person, isn't it? And I'm just going to say monotropic because I think that covers a whole array of things that we all have in common and we can all relate to, rather than, the specifics in diagnosis. But I think that's the thing about being a monotropic person. It's the constant balance between overstimulation and understimulation and finding where your sweet spot is. And I think if we think of it in terms of like polyvagal theory as well, you know, it's such a difficult thing because yes, sometimes we are bone tired and we need to rest and so on and so forth. But actually, even if our body is resting, our brain is just taking over from that. We
Yeah,
don't do nothing. We will find things to latch onto and be in flow state around. Sometimes for me, when I'm brain tired, I know this is probably going to make sense to a lot of you. I need to push myself to do exercise to give my brain a break, you know, because we don't stop. And I don't think monotropic brains can stop, can they?
I my way of stopping,
Mm.
and it's gonna make me sound like a grumpy old man, is I stand for like an hour on my terrace, which is on the roof, and I watch the drivers and I judge their driving because there are so many bad drivers around here.
But that's a hack. So that's what I was going to say. So another hack for me, when I have life admin to do, like, do you know when you've got to clean up and you're looking and you're just going, there's just like I can just see all of these little tasks that just need doing and it's really overwhelming. Do you know what I do? I get
Yeah,
on the phone in my AirPods to my work wife, right? And we just ramble about like work and cases, and then next thing you know, the entire house is clean because I've almost like hacked myself to the perfect level of simulation. So I'm not actually going too deep in whatever it is that I need to do.
yeah.
Great.
Yeah. So we've had a question, and it
Mhm.
will very helpfully lead us into the lily padding stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So the question is from Amy, and Amy says, very niche question, but hopefully you can talk about this when you get to lily padding. But wondering if you have any suggestions about how to help autistic people who have specific interests that are dangerous as they are linked to offending, lily padding away from these. This is
I've
something,
done this.
and it's something I've been involved in too. So take
I
it.
mean, I think if we explain, I'm not going to explain what lily padding is. I'm going to let David do that because the last time we did a talk on lily padding, um, he made me do it. So this time I'm going to make him do it. But I think what I'm going to say to this is I have done this. I've worked with a lot of well, I say a lot, maybe not a lot, I don't know what's a lot. Young autistic ADHD people who are experiencing exploitation through things like county lines or different versions of exploitation, which I won't go into, but are all quite horrendous and can be linked to them creating or like a special interest around drug using, for example, or relationships or a fascination on a particular person, for example. Or I think one particular case was because this young person had a special interest in bodybuilding, and this person who was exploiting them, County Lines, was like into the gym and bodybuilding and steroid use and stuff. So it's something that we actually use. And the thing is, right, I've been doing so where lily padding came from, it wasn't just a case of sitting there and going, oh, how can we fix this and blah, blah, blah. It was like, how do we explain what we do and how we live? How do we explain how we see things and why we do things? So, yeah, it can absolutely be done. I would always say that never ever steer away from um, a special interest, always go towards it, but in a safe way. David, do you want to explain what lily padding is, David?
Okay, so lily padding at its base kind of idea is the concept that if you imagine our lives as a pond, we as monotropic people do not leap from one side of the pond to the other. That tends to end with us falling in the water. We make a route via lily pads. Now, if you imagine a lily pad, for example, as a thought or a topic or an interest, then the lily pads nearby are associated with that interest, and then you move to another, that one of those close by lily pads, and that those lily pads are associated. So it's kind of harnessing that natural associated thinking that people call going off on tangents to guide to a destination on the other side of the pond. And we've been developing the concept more as people are taking an interest in it. So we've been talking about nesting with creating safety in a safe lily pad that you're anchored to so that you can start making your journey but have a place to return to if you start to struggle. And it's based on the idea of an interconnected network of life.
Yeah,
uh,
that everything is a transition.
um,
Every thought, every breath, every moment is a transition. And monotropic people think in much more detail, at much more pace and much more intensity. We feel in that way as well. So it's the idea, and I think what we see is neuronormativity, where it's constantly, how can we get this person to be less monotropic and more kind of not monotropic or neurotypical, how can we, if somebody's burned out and they are kind of like in their bed, for example, like, it can't be right, you need to get up and go to school. How do we create lily pads and spark interest and find flow state and find joy? And then from there, what do we need to do next? What are the non-negotiables? What are the self-care? Do we need to eat? Do we need to, and it's about moving from lily pad to lily pad, but without necessarily, we can have an idea of what we want the end destination to be, but actually we're quite directed also by our flow state.
you're fluid about what that destination is because
Yeah.
it may change as you progress through the lily pads. So in terms of lily padding away from a topic that is related to offending, um here's an example, just an idea off the top of your head, of my head, off the top of my head. So there is, I was really, and trigger warning, I'm going to talk about things decaying. As a child, I had a very morbid interest in digging up my dead pets that were buried in the garden. Um, it was quite upsetting for my mother, but it wasn't, like a horrible
Anything
thing.
sinister?
It
No.
wasn't sinister. It was just an interest. My mum knew that, but obviously I kept digging up dead animals. But
I
over
love
the
how you picked this example. Out of all examples, we go
But
straight for
it's the
decaying
close it's
animals.
the closest to offending I can get to, really. Over the years, that interest moved into identifying causes of death, archaeological cases, and eventually it ended with me doing a degree in forensic archaeology and specializing in the detection of burnt and cremated human remains. So, in terms of lily padding away from offending, go towards the special interest, always go towards it. But how could we make that interest something that's not something to worry about and doesn't feel so
Yeah.
sinister?
How do
In
we
terms of
offer lily
offending,
pads? How do
if
we
the
offer lily pads?
if there yeah, so if there's something offending related, how could we parlay that into something criminology related or forensics related? You know, is there a way of making this a deep interest that doesn't pose the same threat?
And actually, I think as well, what you're doing is so autistic people quite often with special interests love talking about their special interests. So ask them, tell me more, teach me, help me understand. And then we can offer different lily pads. I mean, I think so. I've worked with young people who have experienced voice hearing and burnout and demand avoidance and have been cannabis users, for example, because we all know the link between cannabis and psychosis, and that, and again looking at like exploitation, and that there was, instead of going, and this is the most bizarre thing because you know we tell young people that this stuff is wrong all the time, do you know what I mean? It's so bad for you and blah blah blah, with absolutely no depth, but actually for them it was working because their brain was quiet, they could eat and they could sleep. So anyway, that was a little tangent. But yeah, so what did we do? We lent into it. I started teaching them how to, look at research and how to be critical and what that meant, and looking at understanding their own experience and where that positioned them in, and then offering kind of like different perspectives. Oh, what about this? What about that? So it's never that we are forcing somebody to do anything. What we're doing is we're actually joining them in their flow state, in their interests, and learning and offering different perspectives and different lily pads,
And
you know?
challenging things.
Yeah. Well, if challenge is safe for that young person, you may have to build up that relationship. Every person is different. I love a challenge. I love being challenged. Like that's probably one of the best ways to get me thinking in a different way. But, it's yeah, it's offering lily pads. It's offering different associative thinking, different ideas. It's not being the same person that's gone, okay, we can't say that this is good, but actually, do you know what? Tell me more about your interest. What's interesting about it? How can we offer a lily pad if we don't really lean into it and figure out why? I think I'm hoping that that clears it up without actually looking at what the specifics are. But yeah.
I think I think that's probably the best answer we can give in a podcast format. But
Mhm.
I did want to return to the chat quickly because Anna said that they feel incompetent listening to us all with our successful life hacks, and I wanted to kind of validate and affirm here because I do not have loads of successful life hacks. I've had the privilege of being quite deep in the online autistic community for close on a decade, and I have the academic knowledge of monotropism. A lot of the things I explain to you as life hacks, yes, they do work for me.
Not all the
A
time.
lot of the time, they don't work, and I spend so much of my life feeling incompetent. I one of the biggest problems I have is I feel professionally I do great because I'm in my flow
It's
state.
my interest.
Yeah, but when it comes to everyday living, I'm on an adult social care package. I have carers come in to help me stay on
Mhm.
top of my life. So, yeah, I do have some life hacks, but I still have to have additional support. And it's okay not to be successful and have all
Yeah.
everything work
It's,
for you.
and I want to talk about that like internalized ableism as well. Like it's really easy to assume it's that Instagram thing, isn't it? that just because you see somebody in like a professional capacity or able to deliver something at a high level or in whatever way, that you assume that like their life is fundamentally massively different from yours. You know, I still struggle. There are times when I'm not on top of it. Like we're not like sat here like some massive life gurus of look how wonderful we've got our own lives together. We're like, you know, oh damn, I'm nearly swore then. I'm trying not to do a swear. But we were like, oh damn, you know, we found a community. We were like, oh God, the information that we're being given is not working for us. Maybe we want to create our own information. Maybe we need to do our own learning. Maybe we need to figure it out for our own kids. And then somehow became professionals. And it was an all complete accident, honestly. But yeah. But yeah.
Sharon thinks they had the wrong idea of lily padding. They thought it was taking little hops from lily pad to lily pad instead of a giant leap in reference to getting tasks done.
Is reference to any transition, Sharon.
Yeah.
So the easiest way to think of lily padding and the most practical and easy explanation is gently transitioning from one task, one scenario to another. But that can also be from one state of being to another.
And actually, I want to circle back because we talked about front loading earlier. So
Mhm.
getting the tasks we're not motivated to do done before we get into flow state. That's
Mhm.
actually lily padding in a sense, because as a monotropic person, even though I love the work I do and it gets me into a flow state, I still have to transition into it. That front loading is part of the transition. It's kind of like the wave before it breaks.
Mm.
You know, so for me, that's the way I organize my life, and that's what works for me.
And I guess this is how we think more through a monotropic lens. And that's why, you know, is it transitions? Everything is a transition for a monotropic person. Moving one's attention, because our attention is so deep, can be more difficult, even if it's pain or sensory stuff or anything. So yes, it can be little hops from one lily pad to the next instead of a giant leap, but it's not just a reference to getting tasks done, it's any transition.
Yeah,
I
and
guess you could say we lily padded our way to professional status.
yeah, yeah.
100%.
And one thing I would suggest is, you know, think of in terms of the task thing. Lily padding is about almost creating a gentle flow through those tasks. So, you know, kind of doing it via association and things that prepare us for those transitions between the tasks. You know, as a monotropic person, I can't just yank my attention out of something. So I have to kind of set up my world in a way that something prepares me to gently shift what is like shifting a boulder in terms of my attention into the next thing. And
And it's like Anna's just said here, front loading, for example, it doesn't work for them because as an ADHD, they find it difficult to start that kind of going. And here's the thing, it doesn't always work. It doesn't. But if I catch that wave of flow state or motivation, then you better believe I'm going to catch that like front loading as much as I can. It's not something that you need to do like all of the time, or we're saying that, you know, this is going to work for everybody. It might not necessarily, but it's something that might like, you know, we can only really operate, and this is the thing about lily padding, it's about understanding one's capacity at that time and that moment and being in touch with kind of like your own internal experience, because actually knowing whether a lily pad from I don't know can be, I don't know, say we're getting up, we're getting ready in the morning, knowing whether a lily pad can literally be get out of bed, get dressed and brush teeth, you know, they can be giant leaps for some people. You've got to look at your capacity or the person's capacity and go, right, okay, that's far too much of a leap for them. So actually what we're going to do is we're going to work on waking up and brushing our teeth. Like we need to minimize it more. Or we're going to work on waking up and getting a cup of tea. So it's about understanding one's capacity to see what kind of lily pads you need. And that for me fluctuates on a day-to-day basis. Spoons can fluctuate so much.
Yeah, and it's also accepting that the lily pad you move to may not be the one you intended to move to. As I said earlier, the destination can be a bit fluid because we we we've we've we function through associative thinking. I mean, if you think about it, we've gone off on quite a few tangents, even in this monotropism podcast tonight. Um, and it's it's accepting that the tangents happen, and actually you can learn from those tangents, and you know you can use them to steer and kind of get to where you're going, but that where you're going may not necessarily be where you set out to be going.
Yeah. So Tracy's just said on a smaller scale, it's like not being able to get out of bed and have a shower until somebody comes in and chats and then asks what your plans are for the day. Brilliant. That person's just offered you a lily pad to help you do that, you know?
We've got a question from
Uh-huh.
Anna. How do you work out a path between lily pads towards something that you want to do? Isn't that a bit like breaking a big task down into small tasks? Another thing I often find impossible.
If it's something you want to do, it clearly feels like something that you're not intrinsically motivated to do. Because I think what you mean by want is that you have to do it, because if you're intrinsically motivated to do it, it wouldn't necessarily be that difficult to achieve. I think, yes, it can be breaking big tasks down into smaller tasks, but it could also be doing something closely related that, and actually sometimes the biggest thing, you can use productive avoidance. Productive avoidance is fantastic.
In terms of answering this, a good way of answering this could also be to address the next comment, which is, please could I ask, Hannah says, please could I ask for some practical examples of how to lily pad from one task to another? Would it be through things like music? Just curious, how could this work? Um, could you use the example I've heard you use a few times, Tanya, of for example, lily padding someone into what they want to eat and having lunch.
Oh, do you mean the tuna sandwich thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, avoiding the demand. So other people can be really helpful with so for example, when things feel like a big demand, you almost have to trick your own nervous system. So if I was working with a young person that was distressed and really demand avoidant, what can happen is when you ask them a direct question, that can feel like a threat to the nervous system because they're already working at capacity. However, if I make it about me, for example, and go, oh, do you know what? I think I'm really hungry. I might go and have a tuna sandwich. Do you like tuna? I went off it for ages, but actually, because what you're asking them to do then is join your lily pad, it makes it about me instead of them. And this was something that we get asked a lot in burnout recovery, isn't it? How do we engage young people or even older people that are experiencing extreme demand avoidance? We make it about us and not them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that can be really helpful as well. And I think that's where body doubling as well can come in, because actually we're not hyper focusing on our own experience and on our own self. And that's where I think Hannah and Bobby have just said they use music. A lot of the time, music can be really, really useful to lily pad you. So if you start off with something kind of slow, if you're kind of not feeling, it's that overstimulation, understimulation thing. You can start off with something slow and then build it up and build it up and build it up. And honestly, the best cleaning music for me is either techno or metal. But if I was just to wake up in the morning and put metal on, it would not, like that's not going to go well. That's probably going to end in meltdown. It's like, how do we build up to that kind of level of stimulation where we need to be getting things done? And it may also be we should make a Hannah was saying we should make a list of possible lily pads for the boring life stuff. Kind of joking, but it might actually be helpful. Yeah, yeah. So Vanessa's just said they hit snooze several times before waking up in the morning. I do it twice. That is my routine. That's, because I'm quite demand avoidant. So I tell myself I'm only going to do it once and then I do it twice because I feel like I've got to win.
I do it 6 times and then someone else has to wake me up. Um, but in terms of Anna's big task that they want to do. With the lily padding, it's not about knowing exactly what to do at the start. It's about experimenting to find the way of easing that transition to the task, and then doing the task, and maybe even transitioning through those small steps of the task.
Yeah. Oh,
I think someone has their mic on. I'm just going to make sure they're muted because it's coming through. There we go. It's okay to unmute, but put your hand up
hello.
first if that's okay. Just so if we all start turning our mics on, it's going to be chaos on the recording. I'm just checking the Dana says pets and children are good at getting you out of bed in the morning, like forced lily padding.
Yeah, and actually sometimes that external motivation is completely fine. It's completely okay to use that. It's about understanding what you need. And actually it's about honoring that monotropic thing. You know, it's we're not going to be monotropic. We're not here to teach you how to be neurotypical and have that wonderful brain that goes, I know there's this really pants boring form that I've got to fill in, and all of a sudden I'm going to be able to do it and switch the light on. It's not about that. I wish it was. Sometimes it's like I know that when I have a big overwhelming task to do, what I need, my lily pad, is actual panic. I need panic. I need a deadline. I need that motivation and that kind of almost adrenaline push to get me through it.
Intentional lily padding is kind of
Mhm.
like tricking your body into being motivated. One thing I wanted to get into quickly, because there was the mention of like forced lily padding, and we've got close to talking about it, but we haven't, and I think we have to. Um, Monotropic split. You know, sometimes there are external demands that exceed our attentional capacity. This is your concept, Tanya. So again, I'm going to hand over to you.
Yeah, I know. Anyway, I don't just invent all these things. Like, well, I do, but it's completely by accident. I can remember when I started talking about monotropic split, and I honestly thought it was because there must have been another name for it that I forgot. Turns out it was a new thing, and people kind of really related to it. So yeah, monotropic split for me, it. So David kind of you get frustrated with me sometimes, don't you? Because I will have these thoughts and concepts and I'll sit on them for years because I will not write about it or talk about it until I can basically explain it to a 5-year-old. I
Don't
think
worry, I've got my 2 liters of cold brew coffee. We have time.
but monotropic split, yeah, it's basically was something really simple for me. Um Coming back to the understanding that regardless of kind of neurology, you know, everybody has a finite amount of attentional resources. And if our attentional resources are used up going deeper, then when we are forced to live in a polytropic way, especially if you've got children or a demanding job or anything like that, then we're constantly splitting our attention. But we don't do it in a shallow way. So we're constantly exceeding our attentional resources and putting ourselves in burnout or stress. So I would guess it's kind of understanding why we end up in meltdown and shutdown and burnout.
I kind of think of monotropic split. If you imagine our attentional resources as like a really long rope, it's designed to go down deep underground into deep caves to get you to where you're going deep in that cave. Monotropic split for me is when there are so many side quests that the rope is being pulled sideways until it breaks. Um, and
Mm.
that's kind of how I picture monotropic split in my own life. I'd be interested because I think monotropic split's been out there a while. There might be a few people who are listening now who've read about it. I'd be interested in what other people's kind of feelings are about what monotropic split is, because you and I talk about these concepts a lot, but we don't get a lot of opportunity to see how people have interpreted them. So
No.
if anyone has like a way they interpreted monotropic split, we'd love to hear it or
I
read it.
think I think mainly it's resonated with an awful lot of parents as well, monotropic split. And we're both trustees for AP UK, Autistic Parents UK. Um, so yeah, we see that a lot, don't we? Because parenting pulls we're designed to be a community, but we're not really anymore in terms of like parenting. It takes a village to raise a child. So we've become more and more isolated, I think. And I remember when I was growing up, we had like aunties, uncles, grandmas, kids were always at grandma's, but now you're kind of like more on your own with parenting, aren't you? And the constant dividing of your attention is just exhausting. And I would hazard a bet that it's quite often interpreted as postnatal depression.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the comments, and there's been a few come in. So Dana said, meerkatting mode isn't sustainable. We'll get into meerkat mode in a minute, I think. Bobby says, my kid's entire childhood, that's how I explain monotropic split for me. Um, Vanessa says, perhaps one example is having to care for someone, child, parent, sick partner. Yeah, that is a good example, because especially like for me, like I work professionally, but I'm also a parent, and I I
You care for
constantly,
your mum quite a lot as well, don't you?
yeah, I help my mum out, so like there's various tasks that you're kind of drawn into, and it does divide your attention in a way that it's not designed to be divided. Now, it's not that it's bad that people are dividing my attention that way. I want to help all these people. I want to be a parent and all of that. It's that my brain just isn't designed to be divided in its attention like that. And so that can be that really splitty experience. Uh,
Yeah, I think the first thing that happens for me when like I've been kind of sustaining too many attentional tunnels for too long over a period of time is for me one of the first thing that happens is I become, and this is where meerkat mode comes in, quite hypervigilant, quite unaware of my own internal state, almost anxious, behaving anxiously. And again, I can talk about parenting because parent, so we see this a lot with parents that are struggling to access support for their children or, have more demands. And I always say this as well, whether you're a parent or whether you're autistic adult or accessing support or whatever, the solution to disabled people's struggles always seems to be to demand more attention, time, and mental resources from them, which is the complete opposite of what monotropic split is telling us to do. So I just wanted to put that out there because that annoys me intensely. How, like, for example, when you get kids who have like support plans and stuff, they've got to do all the normal kids' school stuff, but they've also got to do therapy and PECs and Lego groups and so on. And so the solution to an overwhelmed disabled person seems to be more demands. And I think that's why it was so important for me to write about monotropic split, because I'm like, hang on a minute, why are you all not getting it? Here it is, simply.
yes, and Margaret actually summed it up quite well with before we'd even got into the topic when talking about monotropic split. And Margaret said being caught in a hypervigilant state without being able to get into a flow state. Yeah, that kind of is that's probably where you cross the boundary from the experience of split into what Tanya calls meerkat mode.
Yeah,
And Dana affirmed it as yes, meerkatting.
and as well, what I would say is it's that teetering on the edge of that over and under stimulation again, isn't it? It's that needing. So, I never wanted to like reinvent a wheel. I think I just wanted to give a word and a voice to something that we see a lot. I've experienced, you've experienced, and a lot of other people seem to resonate with. But yeah, it's really something. And like Bobby's just said, we're constantly, if you're a disabled person, and if you've got disabled children, you're constantly under professional eyes. So I would say that experiencing monotropic split is a very quick way to start feeling unsafe because you know that you are reaching the end of your attentional resources. And the thing is, right, the reason that autistics love spoon theory is because whether or not we're aware of it, we are always unconsciously accounting our attentional resources or our spoons, right? And this is why we experience time blindness, because time is not the most valuable thing to us. Spoons, cognitive energy, attentional resources, however you decide to frame it, those are that's the most valuable resource to us. So 5 minutes doesn't mean anything if I'm doing a task that's going to take me 1,000 spoons. But 5 hours is fine if you let me engage in my special interests. Time doesn't mean anything. But when we are working towards the edge of our attentional resources, we cannot be in flow state because we have too many demands. We begin to feel unsafe. We are not resetting, we are not processing, right? So we cannot access felt safety. When we can't access felt safety, we become hypervigilant. When we become hypervigilant, it becomes a self-perpetuating cycle. Then what can happen is what I call a monotropic spiral, because we are so desperate to enter that flow state that, things like focusing on negative things, for example, hyper focusing on things that are wrong with us, how it's all our fault. Another example for you, David, when you get into that situation, you start to experience psychosis,
Yeah.
burnout psychosis cycle. So that's kind of really the basis for where all our work comes from. It's
Yeah.
understanding that monotropic nature of people.
And for me, and I think I talk about this in my book, A Guide to Autism and Psychosis. For me, that monotropic spiral, that desperately seeking a flow
The
state,
flow state, the
desperately
flow state.
seeking to monotropically focus, my brain, I guess because of the part of its neurocognitive style that also makes me schizophrenic, for some reason my focus always becomes, there's a conspiracy going on here somewhere, someone is out to get me, and I need to find out who it is. And from there, if it's left unchecked, I build these intricate sort of webs of associated thought where eventually the whole world is part of this massive conspiracy, and I'm hearing voices that are affirming the conspiracy, and it
Because
becomes
that's the way that you experience crisis of
yeah,
resource and connection, isn't it? You know, um, and somebody's just mentioned, having co-occurring conditions like EDS, POTS, or chronic pain, for example. And this is why me and David kind of wrote about when we're viewing things like monotropic split or understanding things through a monotropic lens, or looking things from the perspective of autism plus environment equals outcome, or in this case, monotropic or neurodivergent person plus environment equals outcome, that we also need to look in a capacity perspective at the body mind as an environment, So if David, for example, if you're experiencing, because, I hope you don't mind me speaking on your behalf, but like, psychosis isn't just something that you wake up one day and it's happened, and next thing you know, you're in a 20-piece orchestra with ghosts, and it happens slowly, like
but for me
burnout.
it's a build up. It might start with just a niggling anxiety,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
and it grows from there as like the network of interconnected thoughts
Yeah,
grows,
yeah, yeah.
the
But
anxiety
those
grows,
things that happen in David's body mind also take up attentional resource. So if
yes,
a person has got, I don't know, um, undealt with gastro issues, if they have a lot of pain, like me, I get a lot of pain from hypermobility. When that flares up, my capacity is going to be very, very reduced. And actually you could probably use, and we will at some point, and we are going to do it because, we're trying to get some more work together with Kelly Marler at the minute. It is in the pipeline. But you can look at these concepts as a way to kind of audit, if you like, what is happening with you. Where are your attentional resources being used, assessing, and this comes back to the mindfulness as well, and I think that's why you did the mindfulness stuff, because we're looking at it and going, actually a lot of this stuff means that we're constantly sense checking ourselves, our own
yeah,
capacity, you know
yeah.
um and that fluctuates on a day-to-day basis. So anyway, that's me off my soapbox. Shall we take a break for 5 minutes and then come
We
back?
can we can take a break for 5 minutes. Go have a movement break, everyone. I'll pause the recording, and we'll be back in 5 minutes, just so that people can recenter themselves, maybe. So see you in a minute.
So something that I just wanted to kind of talk about in terms of like lily padding as well is that sometimes is it's about the acceptance that you are an interest-led person, and sometimes that kind of acceptance that actually me pressuring myself to do this task, and don't get me wrong, it's not always possible. There are some things that are unavoidable and it's difficult, and I get that. But sometimes that kind of radical acceptance that you are monotropic and there is no way on God's green earth that you are going to do this form filling thing, and that acceptance and taking that pressure off can sometimes be a lily pad towards being able to do it.
Yeah, and actually, I had a thought during the break as well, which is kind of related. Um, as a ADHDer, I take ADHD medication.
Mm.
I was thinking about, why do I take ADHD medication? You know, what's it actually doing for me here in terms of monotropism and lily padding? And I think of my attention as when I'm trying to shift it to another demand, for example, something I need to do, the transition feels like climbing a mile-high brick wall with no guide rope. Um, the ADHD medication for me turns that brick wall into more of a hill or a slope. It kind of makes it a simpler transition. And it's kind of like I have more control over transitions into tasks and how I engage with tasks rather than my brain being on autopilot and just going, nope, can't do it.
But it still doesn't make you any less interest-led.
No, I'm
Yeah.
still
So I guess
interested.
what you're saying is at this point, ADHD medication for you is a lily pad.
It is. It's a lily pad. It eases the transitions and it helps the things that maybe I'm not motivated to do feel easier to transition into. But I still run the risk that, you know, the number of times I've been doing housework and I've got completely sidetracked, that will happen. I still have
Oh.
moments where I'm like, right, I'm going to take the laundry up to hang. I'm going to put the laundry in the washing machine. Oh, but I've left a load in the washing machine, so I better hang up that load first. And then I get upstairs and I, you know, hang up that load and I go, oh, there's stuff all over the floor. I better hoover. And then whilst I'm hoovering, I'm like, oh, have I paid my electricity bill? I better pay my electricity bill. That
Yeah.
still happens. Uh,
Life in side quest.
but I do find, though, despite the side quests, I'm much more likely to circle back to the task and get it done at some
Yeah. Do you know, I mean, there's simple things really. How do I kind of lily pad myself and understand my monotropic processing and thinking? So I have massive whiteboards up everywhere
point.
that I put like big like letters on and like stuff that I need to do and big writing in different colors. I keep my medication because the first thing that I will want is a cup of tea. Love a cup of decaf Yorkshire tea, me with oat milk, one sweetener. But anyway, sometimes two if it's been a bit of a rocky day. But yeah, so my medication is right next to the kitchen tap in a pot because it's there. It becomes in my interest. It doesn't take extra attentional resources of splitting my attention to be like, I need to remember this thing. I need to remember that, do you know? So
It's interesting
anything
because
that reduces that kind of taxation on your attentional resources is going to ease the potential for monotropic split and be a
I,
lily pad.
I keep my ADHD medication in the pocket of whatever trousers I'm wearing whilst I'm working
And then
because
you lose it for a week. So David lost his medication.
I did.
He did the most ADHD thing ever.
I
It was
lost my
bloody
I
hilarious.
lost my ADHD medication. Do you know what? I'm still missing some. I don't know where it's gone. Like,
When you told me, I was always crying with laughter. I thought it was hilarious. I probably really shouldn't be laughing at like an unmedicated ADHD person right now, but it was so funny.
I've learned to embrace the chaos. No one around me
Embrace.
has, but
And that in itself is lily padding, that radical acceptance as this is how we live and the world isn't built for us. So interfacing with it is difficult. And these are some tools that I can use to manage that. That's
do you know what?
basically what we're looking for.
I spend so much time in and around the autistic community, all my friends, family, people I talk to online, they're all neurodivergent. Then I step out my front door and it's a world filled with neurotypicals, and I'm like, This
I
feels
forget they
confusing.
exist.
Yeah, I forget neurotypicals exist, and then I interact with them, and I'm like, oh, this is
Oh,
awful. And it's not that neurotypicals are awful people. I just don't like the way they do things.
question. Is there a way to, Tracy's asking, is there a way to help people, children understand their monotropism and lily padding as a strategy to collaborate on? Yeah, absolutely. Um, I don't think you're ever too young to start talking about monotropism. There are wonderful resources out there, depending on how old the child is. There's a lot of accessible stuff. I think Kieran's made a few animations about it on YouTube. I think Thriving Autistic have made animations. There's,
Neurobears,
I was just about to say Neurobears as well, which was created by
pandas
Pandas
online.
Online, which is Nick King, Kieran Rose, and Nick King's offspring, Zed.
And
Um,
actually, neurobears is at what age is neurobears? It's
Well, the thing is,
because
it's
they've got
really difficult.
neurobears, cubs, and
Yeah,
un.
so there's Neurobears Cubs, which is younger. There's Neurobears, which starts introducing things like sensory processing, monotropism, overwhelm, shutdown, meltdown. And then there's the Neurobears Unpacking Understanding for teens. And I am on there a lot. We talk about burnout, consent, all periods, all of the alcohol consumption and the impact on the vestibular system.
I'm,
So
I'm,
that
I'm on there talking about addiction. I think it might
yeah,
even
so
be
that's for like
a
teens and young
process.
adults as
Yeah,
well. So yeah, definitely, there are resources out there to help a young person understand monotropism. But what I would say is when you get a real good grasp of it yourself, it'll just come naturally. And so will lily padding as a concept. Like you won't even have to tell them that that's what you're doing. It'll just happen as a way of being and living.
lily padding kind of naturally evolves out of what we do naturally. So if you get a feel eventually and an understanding of how your child moves through the world, transitions between things, then you will eventually that will help you kind of naturally build into the lily padding style they need. And certainly it can be used as a strategy to collaborate on. Lily padding is an inherently collaborative thing. Like, you know,
Yeah, we didn't go, oh, here's a strategy. It was just like, oh, here's what we do naturally. How do we explain it? So it wasn't that we were like, oh, we need to come up with a strategy to make us more neurotypical. It was like, no, how do we live more authentically, honoring what we understand about double empathy, energy accounting, sensory processing, interoception, our own kind of monotropism, and what's worked for us? How do we work with individuals? How do we work with ourselves? How do I work with you, David? How do you work with me? How do we survive as a family, for example? And what's successful. And actually, when we figured it out, it was like, yeah, we lily pad. We embraced that transitional stuff.
yeah, and fundamentally, you know, lily padding is about being accompanying someone on a journey. Imagine it like that. You're not telling them where to go, you're walking alongside them and maybe helping them steer towards the safest lily pad.
And I think what I would say about lily padding as well is if you are supporting somebody who is incredibly burned out, there is high likelihood that they're going to be extremely alexithymic, right? So lily padding is necessary because when we are burned out, our capacity is hugely compromised to know what's best for us, to know what we think, to know what we feel. So being a safe person and offering those lily pads, that's something we need to know what we're doing there because actually when we're supporting somebody that is in crisis or burned out, they don't really have capacity or understanding there. And that this, because we're autism is such a dynamic disability that we fluctuate in what we can achieve. So when we're supporting people, we have to know that when we're offering those lily pads and collaborating and being that safe person and helping them find felt safety, we're also really helping them get to where they want to be as well. It's a huge kind of responsibility, but also a privilege.
Yeah, And Hannah wants to know, does lily padding connect to nesting? And I guess this is a me question, isn't it? Uh, so nesting was kind of a concept that I say I came up with it, actually. It was my mother who first accused me of
And it's a bit
nesting.
like the whiteboards. It's a bit like the whiteboards. The whiteboards and the medication on the side are a
Yeah.
version of nesting.
Yeah. So to get a feel for what nesting is, basically one day my mum told me, David, you always build a nest. And I took that idea and I ran with it. And if you've read any of my writing, it's now a very complicated philosophical concept that I've brought all sorts of things into. But in terms of its connection to lily padding, like imagine uh when you're going on a journey across the lily pads on the water, you're creating a space either within yourself or within your physical environment that it feels safe, it feels comfortable. So it might be organizing a physical space, such as say your bedroom or your living room, into say like a sensory comfort space, a space where you can transition naturally between things. But it's also about that feeling of safety. So it's creating a space within yourself where you're kind of grounded. So if on your journey of lily padding you fall in the water, you're anchored to your nest and you can kind of
Yeah.
come back, feel safe, recuperate, and try again. It's about, in terms of lily padding, nesting is really about having that lily pad where you have that, as Tanya calls it, felt safety.
Yeah, an anchor to go to. So, for example, a really good example of this is my son, goes to an amazing school. They're very, very understanding. Um, I don't talk about my children very often, but um he's globally delayed with some degree of catch up and a PDA profile, or what would be known as PDA profile. But in order for him to feel safe, um, what he takes into school with him is he takes his sensory tubes that he has. He has his ear defenders. He cycles through a different plushie. He has his own desk, which is his own space. In that space, he has, because dinosaurs are his special interest, obviously, best special interest. He has a dinosaur. He has a dinosaur encyclopedia. He has colouring crayons. He has paper, so he can always go back to his drawing and colouring. Those things for him are a nest that he can take with him, that he can have within a classroom, so that he's able to be present in that classroom and join in with the learning at his pace when he feels able to. So instead of demanding from him that he must comply and must conform, what we've done is we've created lily pads, given him a nest, and then made sure that he has the opportunity to join in with what he feels that he can join in with. And that kind of approach to it has meant that actually he's probably engaging with learning 80% of the time because it's on his terms and he wants to do that. And that's what I was talking about lily padding earlier. Sometimes the lily padding is taking away the demands. Now, low demand doesn't mean no demand, but it's about that radical acceptance of your young person is like a monotropic person. They're only ever going to be interest led. So what the teachers are then doing is you've got your little nest, and actually, if anything that we're doing sparks your interest rather than your dinosaur or your colouring or wandering off to another group, then you can jump on our lily pad with us as much or as little as you want. And what that's actually resulted in is more engagement, more interest, more learning. But it's done in a way that promotes felt safety first and connection and relationship with his teacher, because he knows that it's okay for him to say no, and he has his little nesting things to go to if he's overwhelmed.
And one of the things that I've been teaching in the group sessions of my mindfully divergent community is, well, we refer to it as the anchor, but it's the concept from nesting. And what I talked about the fact that often people, they in mindfulness are told to use breath work as an anchor. Now, for a lot of neurodivergent people, breath work is overwhelming or uncomfortable. So I talk about things like mindful stimming. So is there a stim that you can kind of focus on the sensory experience of. Now, in its most basic form, if there is a stim that you can always use to kind of bring yourself to a grounded, feeling safe place, that in itself is the basis of nesting, and you can build from there. So you've got your anchor, you build your nest around it. Your nest is built around the idea of feeling safe, feeling regulated, feeling grounded and present. So I always use the idea of mindful stimming, which is, you know, find something. It could be a fidget toy or a movement or even a sound
Well,
or
for me, that needs more stimulation than that. It's my mobile phone. But what it is, it's not doing anything that requires thought. It's constantly playing matching games to keep me present in the moment, in
yeah,
conversations or meetings that might be quite difficult, in, to be able to fake the intrinsic motivation when the spoons are gone and I am not intrinsically motivated anymore to be somewhere, for example, because we have to work. But yeah, that in itself is an anchor. Me sat there playing matching games when I'm mentoring somebody who's having a really difficult time is not something that's being rude. It's me being able to stay present. It's me having that anchor, that amount of stimulation that I need to be able to stay in that moment. That's a lily pad for me. That's nesting. That's a
yes,
nesting item.
you're building the nest around the feeling of safety. I'm aware we're getting close to the end, and we've got a lot of comments coming in. Someone's helpfully posted, I think that's Fergus's website, monotropism.org.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good website. Yep.
Stimpunks is pretty good too.
VJ asks if there are any animations on monotropism as they're in low capacity. And Bobby says there's some on YouTube. I think someone, yeah, Dana shared a link there. Anna says, I have a whiteboard which I forgot to use. Also, the first thing I wrote on it was fix whiteboard to wall, and I never worked out how to do that. That's like
I
a
love
classic
that. I love
ADHD.
that.
That's
Yeah,
something I
yeah.
would do.
So do you know
Um,
what? Remove the demand to fix it to the wall and prop it up on something.
Yeah. Um, Vanessa says that they've been doing a lot of the concepts like lily padding and nesting for years and not even realize they're doing it. And this is our point. We're not
We're
reinventing
not
the wheel.
reinventing
We're
the
giving a
wheel.
name to something natural. We're trying to take an idea, a concept, an abstract concept, and make it something tangible. Dana's happily posted Pandas Online catalog, so that's at pandasonline.org/catalog. So you'll find the Neurobears stuff there. Margaret joined in saying islands of safety.
Yeah, so Kieran Rose talks a lot about islands of safety, and Kelly Mailer talks a lot about felt safety. Again, like I think that all we try and do, even when Damien talks about double empathy, it wasn't something that never existed. It's just about giving names and accessibility to things that we all experience, and also community as well by sharing stories as well.
Yep, and Dana said, my young person made a nest within her blazer when still attending school. Her blazer was her safety blanket. It's a good example. Portable
Perfect.
nest, best sort of nest to have.
Mm.
LRW said, I carry a large backpack wherever I go with everything I could possibly need. I thought I was stimming with the weight on my back, but it seems like that's a form of nesting too. Absolutely.
But actually, the stimming can also be part of the nest.
Yeah. And I take a backpack with me everywhere. I
Like
call
I
it,
love a pain stim. Pain stims are my thing.
yeah. I call my backpack my dad bag because not only does it have my stuff in it, I carry a first aid kit and cowpole in it. Uh,
The pink stuff, the pink good
yeah,
good.
yeah. So I'm prepared for all parenting outcomes.
But you see, do you know what? I never thought about this, but like as somebody who's like assigned female at birth or a woman, like I carry like these huge big bags around with handbags with me all the time. But actually, that's a form of nesting because I've got everything in the kitchen sink, like my lip glosses, the ones that smell good. Smells are really grounding for me. So many different perfumes, different glasses, just in case the ones I'm wearing that day feel a bit weird on my face. Like there's so much stuff in there. And actually, that's a form of nesting. So, ladies, people who wear handbags, like if it's full of lots of really random rubbish, it's okay. It's nesting. It's normal.
Tracy asks, how do we get schools to accept this though? My immediate answer is lily pad them. And by that, I mean use the language that they will understand. Tanya, I think you've probably got more to say on that point.
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole conversation in itself. We delivered like literally a talk on how to speak to professionals, but this is what we mean about lily padding as a way of life, you know? when you start embracing it, as you can almost gentle parent school staff and local authorities sometimes, and treat them like a very privileged white male. Sorry, David, never tell them that they're wrong.
I'm only kind of white, so
Yeah, well, you know.
um Hannah says, I've always collected trinkets my whole life and started nesting in the pregnancy sense, only 5 months pregnant. I didn't know I was autistic at the time. I only knew I had to have my child's room ready with everything I could possibly need, ready down to every nappy and muslin. Then COVID hit and I felt very vindicated. There was a reason I needed everything ready early. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, nesting is you've done what you need to do to create felt safety in your space for you and your child. Completely very normal, monotropic thing to do.
And yeah, I think we've really run out of time to go through the rest
Yeah.
of the
I
comments. So
did just want to just touch on this one thing as well, because it's kind of where I'm at now, because I'm getting old, David. I'm getting old. The Botox is no longer Botox in my body is just going, no, you're going to get old. Right. So I often tell people I don't have RBF. If you know what RBF is, it's literally the Botox, but no, I really do have that very thingy face. But anyway, side questing again. So somebody's asked, I'm now 55 and I feel though my monotropic tendencies and need to nest in lily pad are getting worse as I get older. Is that a common theme? Absolutely, yes. Perimenopause is just starting with me, and oh my God, I want to pull my ears out of my head because it's an entirely different sensory experience. So I'm going to circle back. Oh my God, I just used a circle back phrase. I feel like I'm being all LA. So I'm going to circle back to what we talked about when we talk about the body mind as an environment. When that changes for you, when you are ill, when you're experiencing flare up, when your allergies, when your hormones are different, when something feels different in your body, all of those things are going to make your spidey senses tingle and reduce your capacity. And when your capacity for, I don't want to say flexibility of thought, but when your attentional resources are reduced, or anything that feels off to you or is not preset for you is going to take up some attentional resources, right? So perimenopause, menopause, absolutely. I mean, that's a minefield. What's happening in my body? What's happening with my brain? Your capacity is going to be massively reduced, and that means you're not going to be able to mask. And that means you're going to feel the sensory experiences more intensely because your body's on alert for the differences. So yeah, we know that a lot of women and people that experience menopause get diagnosed with ADHD. I'm not sure about autism yet, if we've got enough of the research yet. But yeah, that anything that alters the environment of your body mind is going to really kick rocks, really. Yeah.
and before I, close out the podcast, I will say, regardless of your gender identity, aging is a transition you don't get a choice in,
Yeah,
and
it's a transition.
it can be very jarring. So, um, you
Things
know,
aching that didn't used to ache and
I'm 35. I've been hypermobile my whole life. The chronic pain is really kicking in now.
it's really
Um,
chronicking.
yeah, the changes that we go through as we age, we don't get a choice in them. They are transitions, and they can really jar you and take up your attentional resources. And so when people say, oh, I feel more autistic as I get older, absolutely, because you are dealing with more changes that your body is not giving you a choice in. But I want to say thank you so much. This has been a really good first episode of Neurodiversity in Discussion. Please keep an eye on my website to see when the next one happens. We're thinking every other month, but we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, and also don't be afraid to drop a message to David's kind of like website or Facebook page if you've got something that you might want us to discuss, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
we're happy to take.
we're open to ideas.
So if you go to dghandconsultancy.co.uk/events, you'll see all my upcoming events, including these webinar podcasts. And if you're on that website, there's like a million ways to contact me on there. So please do get in touch with your suggestions. This has been a really good first episode. And as I said, I'm David Gray-Hammond. I've been here with
Tanya Adkin.
And thank you very much for tuning in and listening, and being here live with us and joining in. It's been really fun. I've really enjoyed it. So,
And no slides. Bye.
yes, no slides. Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye.